Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Shelf Board Game Reviews. This is a new video series where I'm going to take 7 different games that meet a certain criteria and bring a video series to you to help you pick basically what's going to be going on in a very interesting thematic, maybe, or maybe mechanic wise, or well, just watch the video series and you understand what's going on. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick, with your help, watch the EYAK to help pick some of these topics, but through your votes and through your interaction, I'm going to bring a series of 7 games that meet a certain criteria. In this specific video, we're going to talk about 7 RPGs for people who want to go from board games and start learning about RPGs. Now specifically, this video series, or this video right here, is going to target board gamers who have not played RPGs or maybe have very little experience with RPGs and are actually interested in RPGs and wanting to start playing them and want to know where would you start in this large landscape with all these multiple different RPGs, different mechanics, different gameplay, and where the heck was a great place to start. So I think that these are 7 games that fit that criteria extremely well. It can help you as a board gamer start playing some RPGs if that's what you're interested in. Now this video was picked by your feedback in the EYAK #1, so this is the first in the series. If you want to help bring more of these videos out, make sure you check out the EYAK for a bi-weekly series where you get to vote on the future of this series also. Now after this one, we're going to look at possibly some dice games or maybe some other topics, so if you have any other suggestions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. Now specifically, we're going to talk about 7 RPGs that are going to meet a couple different criteria here, but they're also going to be RPGs that are going to be quite wide in their genre, quite wide in the way they play, quite wide on their mechanics, and also from introductory all the way up to a little bit more deeper, stronger games that require a little more of a learning curve to them, but nothing too complex for people who played board games before. So let's go and start this off with the first game. Now these are not numbered in any specific order. Don't think I'm trying to say that one of these is better than the others, because that's not the purpose of the series. This is just 7 great games that represent a genre. So let's go and start with Fiasco. Now if you're not familiar with the game Fiasco, Fiasco is basically every single disaster movie that you've ever seen or ever heard about or ever read about. Well, I guess that would be a disaster book if you're reading about it, but it's every single disaster that's come to a head, and it's in an RPG format. Now the interesting thing about this game is that it actually uses very simplistic D6 dice mechanics, and another very cool thing about this game is it's not campaign based. So I know that's something that people who play RPGs are not always interested in. They don't want something that's going to take them years to play out. They want something that's going to be one and done, and that's why this is a perfect example of that, the game of Fiasco. Basically, this is every single disaster film rolled up into an RPG that doesn't require a GM. If you've seen films like Fargo, The Simple Plan, or if you've seen things such as Burn After Reading, you know exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the game of Fiasco. Now, the one reason why it's on this list is because it's truly a group-oriented experience where all the players are going to take part of a system where no one feels like they have to play the GM or the Dungeon Master or whatever you want to call it. Now that's kind of the cool thing about Fiasco. That's one hesitation people have about getting into an RPG experience, because everybody's like going, well, I don't want to be the GM. I don't want to have the responsibility of having to make the adventures every week, the responsibility of putting everything together, and the responsibility of working towards a campaign that I have to do a lot of work on. And that's the cool thing about Fiasco. Now, a lot of these RPGs on this list that I'm bringing in right here, you're going to see that I have them in PDF format because I am a huge fan of Drive-Thru RPG. Now, they're not a sponsor of the show. They're not supporting me in any way. I just want to mention that of these 7 games, 6 of them you get through Drive-Thru RPG, and of these 7 games, 5 of them I actually own through Drive-Thru RPG, because I appreciate how much simpler it is to have a PDF of an RPG, especially with these specific RPGs we're talking about on this list. So you're going to see a couple screenshots I'll bring up to help you accentuate some of these points I'm trying to make. Now the cool thing going on further about Fiasco is that it has some very simple mechanics. The game is just a whole bunch of D6s in 2 different colors. You're going to have D6s in one color and D6s in another color, and you're just going to have a whole bunch of cool tables. And then there are so many different Fiasco scenarios in this game that only takes a couple hours to play. You have sample scenarios such as RPG styles and the fantasy style. You have disaster films. You have some horror ones. There are so many different of these Fiascos, and it's interesting how the players play this game, how every one of these scenarios play out, and how everything is going to come together to a head to create this really interesting RPG environment. Now the game is going to play over 2 simple different acts, and there's going to be a resolution at the end where some of the players may kind of win, which is, I know, something that board gamers enjoy. They want to have the ability to feel like they won or maybe lost, and that is something really cool about Fiasco. It does give you that closure at the end where some people may have a good resolution. Okay, let's face it, it's Fiasco. Everybody's going to have a pretty terrible resolution, but somebody's going to be less terrible than somebody else, and then you can feel a little bit like a winner in that aspect. And the game is great because it only plays in about 2.5 hours, which is really awesome for the entire game. You can basically bring your friends over, bring out a whole bunch of D6s, hand out some little 3x5 poster cards, hand them out to everybody, put the Fiasco together, play through the entire game, and be done and cleaned up in 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours tops, depending on how much interaction you want from the different players. Now, the interesting thing is this game does have some really cool character generation. It's group effort based on the roll of the dice, based on a community pool and generous helping of just creative group ideas where all the players are going to talk together and try to come up with the ideas and decide exactly what they want to do for the Fiasco, how it fits with the specific Fiasco and all these different environments. And it's what's so darn awesome about the game. And finally, the amount of work for a GM in this game is, well, there's 0 work for a GM in this game because this game is played without a GM. It's one of the awesome bonuses of the game. The player is going to make the Fiasco together, play through the Fiasco together, and they're all going to come to an end based on the roll of the dice and interaction with the other players. That's Fiasco. Next up on the list is Paranoia. Now, specifically, I'm talking about the newest edition, the Red Clearance Edition. Now, Paranoia is an RPG that has been around for a long, long time. It's gone through multiple editions, and some editions have been good, some have been not so good, but I can tell you the Red Clearance Edition is definitely in the good category when it comes to talking about Paranoia. Now, what is Paranoia? It is a very light-hearted, futuristic RPG that puts the dis in dystopian, and that starts right immediately from the character generation. I'll talk about it in just a few seconds. But basically, it's a futuristic world that is, well, the computer is insisting that everybody has a very idyllic lifestyle, and they're all basically kept drugged up and forced to do various tasks. Now, I know when you describe it like that, you're kind of like, well, what the heck is the fun about this game? Well, the fun about the game is because it's such a trash dystopian future where everybody is trying their hardest, and life doesn't matter because every single person has a clone right behind the next corner ready to take their place as soon as they're squished by some kind of machinery that's going to crash down and crush them because they failed to obey the computer. Now, this reason why this game is actually on this list is quite a few reasons. This game is designed right out of the gate to be extremely lighthearted. Now, that's one thing that is really interesting when you're trying to get into RPGs. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I see these awesome podcasts like Critical Role, and there's no way that I could ever be as good as Critical Role, so I'm probably not going to look into RPGs. Well, these lighthearted RPGs are actually really fantastic to help you get your foot in the door because they're not super serious. Some of them, like Paranoia, is actually a campaign-based system. But when we're talking campaign-based, we're talking about your 5th clone may make it to the 2nd adventure, and maybe your 6th clone might make it to the 3rd if you're really lucky, and the other players sitting around the table aren't doing their darndest to try to get you killed. Oh yeah, that's another cool thing about Paranoia. All the players are not really on the same side. They are because they're all trying to survive the machinations of the crazy computer. But it is survival of the fittest, and the last man standing, or should I say the last clone standing, is usually one who's best off, at least in most of the circumstances. So everything about this game is a complete group effort. The computer guarantees it. Oh, I'm sorry. The computer demands it's a group effort. If you play the game, you got the pun of the joke I'm trying to make right there. The game allows the GM to be a little bit more adversarial, which is really, really cool. Because if you played board games before, you know that you are the type of gamer who likes a truly cooperative game. Or you like a game where everybody's against each other, or you like playing a one versus all, which is kind of hard to do in an RPG environment. Because most of your RPGs, the DM, Dungeon Master, Game Master, whatever you want to call it, their objective is to create a good environment that is a challenge, not a death steamroller where the players have no chance of surviving. But in Paranoia, you kind of get to do that as a GM, and you're kind of not really on the side of the players. Of course, you're not going to be outright ready to stomp them around every corner, but you're not their friend. And it's pretty obvious you're not their friend, especially as you play along, because the GM gets to play the horrible, evil, crazy computer that's trying to ruin their life and make life so much difficult for all the other players. And adding to the comedy level of the game is the fact that life in this game is super cheap. So you can feel like you're not having to make the most optimal decisions. Something can look like a dumb idea, and you can do it because, hey, you know there's another clone just waiting for you around the next corner that's going to take your place. Might be a couple memories lost, might be covered with some strange goop, but you get to take the place. You don't have to worry about being dropped out of the game because you made a bad decision. And you get to keep the lightheartedness going and have a lot of fun and keep going with the game. And the game also really lends itself very, very well to a one-shot environment. Now, like I said, you can play a campaign system with this game, but most people really don't. You may play a couple adventures, and then you're going to start a whole new mini couple 2-3 shot campaign going on. But that's kind of the cool thing about Paranoia is you don't have to feel like you're forced to create this long-term, month-long, multiple-month, or year-long campaign that happens with a lot of these very deep, robust RPGs, such as 5th edition or Pathfinder, or some of these RPGs that make you play out for many, many years, because some people just don't want to put that kind of devotion into an RPG. They want to be able to say, hey, I'm done playing this, or I want to play some more of it. And the Paranoia game is really perfect for that, because you can kind of drop in and out, stop playing the game, go back and play at a later date, make up a character, have fun for maybe a couple weekends, and say, hey, let's do something else for the next couple weekends, and go, hey, let's go back to that Paranoia thing because it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Now, one of the really cool things about Paranoia is the character generation of this game, and that actually starts setting the tone of how the game is played itself, because right from the beginning, all the players are basically trying to screw each other over, and it's kind of cool how the game works. Because the way the character generation works is every single player is going to assign attribute numbers to all their attributes, and whatever attribute I'm really, really good in, there's a guarantee that there's somebody at the table who's going to be very lousy at it, and I kind of get to influence the table going around. But the problem is, the person I screw to the left is going to screw the person to their left, who's going to screw the person to their left, who's going to screw the person to their left, who might screw me over. So it's kind of an interesting mechanic where the players are already working on their paranoia, fitting the theme of the game and trying to build these characters, and it's a really interesting, quick character generation. And another final thing that's really cool about Paranoia, you can invite your friends over, call them up and say, hey, we're all going to play Paranoia this weekend. Everybody can just show up with a couple 6-sided dice and one computer die, and then sit down at the table, make your characters as a group, and that's part of the fun of the game. And then play a quick adventure and get everything done maybe in 4.5, 5 hours, and have a heck of a lot of fun doing it. Now, this game doesn't have a lot of GM work, which is kind of nice because there are tons of adventures already made up for the game. Like I said, this game has been around for many, many, many years, 20 plus years if I'm not mistaken. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's over 20 years at this point. This game has been around for so long, and you can easily gently borrow prior adventures and create really quick campaigns. The game is lighthearted enough that you don't need to put a lot of thought into it as a GM. It's basically just saying, I think the computer is going to go crazy and create a death ship, and the player's going to stop it. Okay, go! So there's not a lot of work to put into it. It's a lot of fun, very lighthearted. That's Paranoia, and that's why it's on the list. Next up on the list is Gamma World. And now when I'm talking about Gamma World, I'm specifically talking about the 7th edition of this game. Now that's the kind of interesting thing about RPGs. If you're new to RPGs themselves, you got to understand that RPGs come out with new editions all the darn time. Some of these RPGs have been around for 25, 30 plus years, and they get reimagined, more modernized, and brought more into the modern times when it comes to RPGs. So when I'm talking about Gamma World, I'm definitely talking about the 7th edition. But if you played RPGs before, I can definitely suggest some of the early editions of Gamma World, which are really, really fantastic. Although some of them can be really brutal, very, well, I don't want to say realistic, because getting mutant powers from radiation is not realistic at all, but some of the earlier editions can play much more realistic. Gamma World 7th edition itself is based on the 4th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. If you don't think that makes a great board game environment, well, you need to understand that all of those adventure system games are purely based on 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So I was going to let you know that if you're trying to slide into a board game environment into an RPG, Gamma World 7th edition is a really, really fantastic way to get into it. Now, Gamma World, if you're going to buy this game, it is available on Drive-Thru RPG, but this is one of the ones that I would probably suggest you try to track down the box set for the game. And the reason why I say that is because the game does come with cards, and I'm not going to say these cards are mandatory, but you probably want to use these cards because they kind of fit in with the mechanics of the game. And Paranoia, the game I just talked about a little bit ago, also does the same, but the cards are, well, I guess the cards also required there, and I didn't talk about that earlier. It's just two games that you probably want to buy retail is Gamma World and also Paranoia. Sorry, I'll mention a little bit late here, just because of the fact that both these games use cards. But if you go through Drive-Thru RPG, the cards are available. You just gotta print out a lot and use a lot of printer paper. If you're okay with that, not really a big deal. So, what is Gargoyle and why is it on the list? Gargoyle is the game that's designed right out of the gate to be an extremely lighthearted game, kind of like Paranoia, which is really, really cool. And that's kind of a really good thing when you're trying to learn RPGs. Lighthearted is a positive. You don't want to get into these very deep, rich games where people have to bring out their acting chops and try to do this fantastic job as a thespian to try to create this rich environment for all the players. Sometimes it's fun just to play a crazy game where crazy stuff happens, and crazy is definitely the nature of the beast when it comes to Gargoyle. Everything about this game is designed to create this really, really lighthearted game environment where it's not a big deal if the players die. It's not a big deal if the players have a rough time. It's not really a big deal if the world of Gargoyle itself beats the players down, because character generation is such a fantastically light, easy thing. Basically, the way character generation works in this game is every single player is going to roll a 20-sider twice, and that's going to give them one of two character abilities. You're going to combine these two character abilities together, kind of like Smash Up, the card game, if you ever played that, to create your race. And it uses some very simple stats, very much strongly based on D&D, because this game is very strongly based on D&D 4th edition. So that also makes the game very easy. The game comes with some very cool pogs, some very cool maps, some very cool adventures, and all these adventures also add to the lightheartedness, add to the joy, add to the simplicity of getting the game to the table, and finally, all of them add a lot of replay and lots of variety, and also create very, very little work for the GM. Since there's so many adventures and so much adventure potential in this game, and let's face it, making adventures for Gargoyle are super easy. If you ever played Fallout or any games like that, you probably have about 1,000 adventure ideas just going through your head already. And if not, just sit there and think about, if bunnies got irradiated and got laser guns and power armor, what would happen? Oh, I know. It'd be a Gargoyle adventure. That's kind of the cool thing about Gargoyle. Really quick game to make characters, really quick game to play, really fantastic, fun, interesting game. That is Gargoyle. Now, when we're talking about the GM aspects of it, a little bit more work required. This game does have some campaign potential though, so it is a lot of fun, very lighthearted, a game that's really fun to bring to the table. Next up on the list, we have Dread. Now, what else can I say about Dread at this point? I added it to my top 51 games of all time. I've talked quite a bit about Dread, but if you haven't watched any of those other videos, Dread is a phenomenal storytelling environment of a game that creates the greatest tension you will ever have in an RPG, because the game has the simplest mechanic. It's a Jenga tower with a lot of storytelling. If anything happens by the Jenga tower following, something terrible or tragic is going to happen to a player until either the adventure or the scenario is finished, or all the players have become victims of the Jenga tower. Now, this game is truly, truly brilliant, and I can go on and harp on it for a long, long time, but I've done it multiple times, so I'll spare you that right now. But I was going to say that why is this game on this list? Because you take the classic Jenga and you create no other strange mechanics that's strange to anybody. If you know how to talk and you know how to play Jenga, you can play Dread. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to set up the Jenga tower in the center of the table, and then you as a GM, every time that you're trying to advance the story, advance the plot, or advance the adventure, and I'm just going to say right now, there are so many adventures for Dread. You go online and download free ones, you can go online and find them for $1, you can go to the Drive-Thru RPG and probably get about 30 of them for about $10, which is going to be enough enjoyment for about 30 weekends worth of gaming. So there's plenty of variety in this game, making sure there's a lot less work for the GMs in this game. But basically, you as a GM are going to start telling a story. Anytime the players want to do something that can potentially fail or increase the intention of what is going on, you simply just tell them to make a draw from the Jenga tower. If it's a really tense situation, maybe you'll tell them to draw twice, or maybe if they're trying to escape from a burning barn, they're up in the rafters, they're trying to jump over flaming fire, avoid the embers that are falling down from the left, and try and make it to survival without falling to their immediate peril, maybe make them draw 3 times from the Jenga tower. As long as you succeed in your draw from the Jenga tower, you survive, you keep going. The story continues, at least for your plucky little adventurer. If you fail, you may not die immediately, but do know that you are the next person in the story who's going to perish. Now, there is a little bit of a negative with Dread because, like I said, this is a game that does have player elimination. Usually the good thing about the storyline, though, is that once somebody perishes, that doesn't mean, or that usually means that the rest of the party or the players or the people in the story are going to start falling behind pretty darn quickly. Usually Dread adventures usually run about 4 hours, And usually about the 3-hour mark is when one player dies, and about 15-20 minutes later somebody else dies, and about 15 minutes later another person dies, and about 5 minutes later somebody else dies, because the tension is just ratcheted up so high at that point that it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Usually what happens by the end of it, usually 1 or 2 people may make it through the adventure and everybody gets to carry on, or you can just maybe even potentially make it a little bit limited campaign. Now, that's the cool thing about Dread. It is very much designed for a one-shot environment. It is also very brilliantly designed to be able to play multiple different genres. It fits a murder mystery very, very well. It fits the horror genre very, very well. It fits noir very, very well. There's multiple different scenarios. You can even do some very good, you can almost base it off the, oh my gosh, I'm trying to blank, the TV show Supernatural. You could technically do a TV show like Supernatural, and where you have like a creature feature of the week type of game, make it almost into a campaign game just using Dread, because the way the characters are generated, the way the game plays, and the way everything happens is just really phenomenally done. Now, Dread does require a little bit more work on the part of the GM. The way you're going to start every single adventure is you're going to send an email out to all the other players, and it's basically a questionnaire that allows them to answer what their character is, why they're there, and why are they doing what they're doing. So you, as a GM, already have to have a rough idea of what you want for the adventure. Fortunately, like I said, there are so many adventurers available for this, so you can basically take any one of these adventurers and email out the questionnaires to all the players. They'll bring the questionnaire to the table on game night, and you also got to make sure they email them back to you. Make sure you get on the case, make sure they do email back to you. That way you can prepare and have the adventure ready. That's Dread, a phenomenal game, a great enjoyment, a really, really great entry into RPGs, and a fantastic RPG to keep on the table at all times. Next up we have Star Wars, and when I'm talking about the Star Wars RPG, because there's been lots of different iterations of the Star Wars RPG system, but when I'm talking about this, I'm specifically talking about the Fantasy Flight Games Edition version of Star Wars, the RPG. Fantasy Flight deserves a lot of kudos for doing a phenomenal design on the Star Wars RPG. It's probably the best rendition of the Star Wars RPG out of any other renditions. But again, I'm not doing a review of the game, so I'm not going to harp on that too much, but I am going to tell you why it belongs on this list. So what is the Star Wars RPG from FFG? Well, basically, this is a game. Well, okay, it's Star Wars. I'll just start with Star Wars. It's the easy elephant in the room. It's Star Wars and an RPG, but what Fantasy Flight has done is they've taken the best parts of Star Wars and made each one into their own little RPG system that can be combined or cross-pollinated any way you want. If you really enjoy playing a rebel, you want to be the rebellious Han Solo, and you want to try to play that kind of game as a smuggler, you can, using the right version of the Star Wars game. And again, I'm saying version, that's really not the right word, because it's one system, but it's got individual 3 different box sets which allow you to play different scenario styles of game. You can also play the game as a Jedi, going against the Jedi, being a Jedi for the good, or you can be a Sith Lord, or if you really want to, you can even do the Age of Rebellion, which allows you to play during the Star Wars, the most, probably in my opinion, the best Star Wars film out of all of them, which is The Empire Strikes Back, where you can play out across planets of Hoth. You can do all those fantastic things in a really awesome RPG system. Now, this is on this list because, well, of quite a few reasons, and I almost hesitated on putting it on this list because I do appreciate that of all the games on this list, this is probably the most complex RPG out of all of them. And it is. I'm not going to lie to you, it is most complex, but I know how complex that some board games can be, and I think the fact that it is Star Wars and how well every one of us knows Star Wars can allow you to overcome the difficulties of learning a little bit more challenging of an RPG system. Additionally, this game also is one of the few RPGs, and this is why it's so darn brilliant, why it's on this list, because it has one of the best dice systems. Because in a lot of your RPGs, you're basically going to get a target number that you got to roll higher than, and if you roll higher than, you succeed. You roll less than, you fail. Well, what they did with Star Wars is they created these dice system, which is really interesting. You're going to roll all these dice together, and while you may succeed, there's dice that are called threat dice, and if these threat dice give you certain results, you may succeed, but the game master is going to give you additional complications, which makes it much more of a thematic environment. So you may have to make a roll to climb up a wall while a stormtrooper is chasing you, but if you roll a threat die, maybe when you get to the top, you're going to fall and twist an ankle. So now you have a penalty to go on your further, or maybe when you get to the top, you're going to have a fight with some kind of stormtroopers waiting up there for you. Now you're at a penalty because you twisted your ankle, which was caused by the threat die. So this game helps teach and coach newer game masters and learn how to create these wonderful wonderful thematic storytelling environments because the dice basically helps you tell that story. You're going to tell the players to roll a dice, and you're going to see that 2 of the threat dice come up and go, okay. Well, the challenge here is they're trying to race a speeder bike. Oh, I know. The speeder bike's going to malfunction because they got a threat die. So, hey, that can help me increase the story and create the environment and add to the storytelling, which creates this wonderful, rich, very strong story-driven environment, which is why the Star Wars RPG is really, really so fantastic and so fantastically done. It's the dice system and also the fact that the game comes with, I'm trying to remember the name of it, there's these little tokens that are light side and dark side tokens. Now, they're basically double-sided. One side is light side, one side is dark side. And the heroes can use the light side tokens, but as soon as they do, they're going to flip over to the dark side, which allows the game master to use them to add complications, which is another really cool mechanic and adds to the storytelling and the cinematic feel and strength of the game, which so strongly matches a Star Wars game. Now, like I said, you have the Edge of the Empire, which is going to be the bounty hunters and the scoundrels. You have the Age of Rebellion, which allows you to relive those classic Star Wars moments like the battle on Hoth and all those other wonderful environments like that. Then you also have the Force and Destiny box, which allows you to play the Jedi, allows you to play as Sith and have all those fun. And the cool thing is about this is all these box sets you can get for under $30 on Amazon, which is fantastic. So if you get a whole bunch of friends together and say, yeah, let's learn an RPG, let's have some fun, let's play this really cool cinematic game, it's only going to cost you less than $30 for you to get all your friends around the table and pick the scenario you want. You want to play a Jedi? Go ahead and pick the expansion or the box set for that. You want to play the Rebels? Go ahead and pick that box set for it, and you're going to have a lot of fun. The game does have a little bit more of a complex character generation system, but it's really not that bad. It has some statistics that make a lot of sense. They're going to have a variety of variables anywhere from the attributes are from 1 to 5. Then you're going to pick your talents, you're going to pick your skills. A lot of that's going to be based on the race you're going to play. So if you pick a Wookiee, you're going to have basic certain stats and talents. If you pick a human, you have basic stats. You pick a Twi'lek or a Twi'lek, you're going to have various different abilities. So the game, while it's a little more complex and it's the most complex game on this list, do understand that it does help you do a lot of these things, and this is probably one of the more cinematic RPGs out there. And again, FFG demands or really deserves a lot of kudos for the fantastic job they did with this game. Now, this game does require the most work out of any game on this list when it does come for the work that the game master has to provide. But the nice thing is, if you've seen Star Wars movies, if you read Star Wars books, it's not hard to come up with an adventure. Just say, okay guys, you are flying your smuggling ship and you see a Death Star. What do you do? Okay, that's probably a terrible adventure, but you get the idea. That's not really that hard for the GM to come up with adventures. Plus, this game in various different iterations has been around for many, many years. You have the West End Games version of Star Wars. You have the TSR version of Star Wars. You have the FFG version of Star Wars. There is a rich, rich well of stuff that you can mine from to create so many different adventures to make sure this is a wonderful campaign system that plays fantastically as a campaign system and creates a rich gaming, very rich cinematic environment. That's Star Wars, the RPG from FFG. Next up on the list is Mouse Guard. If you have friends and you're playing Root, buy Mouse Guard. I'll just leave it at that. I can just do the mic drop and walk away at this point. If you're playing Root and you think it's a heck of a lot of fun, you would love to know what it'd be like to play in that wonderland of the forest creatures, buy Mouse Guard. But what is Mouse Guard? Mouse Guard is an RPG based on the Burning Wheel RPG system, and the books based on the books from the Mouse Guard series, which is from I think 2001 or 2003. Somebody can correct me on that if they like in the comments down below. I'm trying to go off the top of my head here, but basically the players are playing mice. They're intelligent mice, but it's not like your typical silly anthropomorphic mice. These are mice who are trying to survive in a dark environment where the bad guys aren't other, humans or anything like that. You are literally, 8 feet or 8-inch tall mice, and your enemies are giant snakes. Your enemies are not giant weasels, but your enemies are the weasels. Your enemies are these other creatures. So it creates a really interesting environment that feels kind of like a medieval fantasy world, but you're the real animals of a realistic world. So your enemies are not orcs and elves. Your enemies are the weasels that are your enemies trying to encroach on your territory. I'm kind of rambling here. It's kind of hard to explain if you never read the Mouse Guard books, but if you read the Mouse Guard books, you understand exactly what this is. The players are going to be part of the Mouse Guard, and they're going to be going on various different adventures and various different scenarios trying to do things to keep their poor, humble villages, their poor, humble scenarios, or poor, humble little locations going in these tragic environments, trying to survive through the winter, trying to get the supplies while the other environments are working so hard against them, such as predators and all these different creatures. This game is designed extremely well. It's a very simplistic system. If you played a lot of board games that use a D6 system where you succeed on a 4, 5, or 6, you pretty much can understand how to play Mouse Guard. Everything you're going to do is going to give you a whole bunch of dice to roll based on your stats and your skills, anywhere from 4 to maybe 6 dice you're going to roll. Sometimes less, you know, it depends on what you're trying to roll for. And you're basically looking for 4s or 5s for successes, or 6s for a great success, and 1s, 2s, and 3s are absolute failures. Very simple mechanic that we've all seen in plenty of different board games, so it's easy to teach that to the players. Additionally, this game has a really interesting character generation system that forces, well, I shouldn't say force, that's the wrong word, but it encourages players to play to their own weaknesses and play to their own strengths, because that's going to help advance them through the storylines. And this game is also really good because while it does foster a campaign environment, it doesn't foster a long campaign environment. You can usually play Mouse Guard over maybe 6 to maybe 9 gaming sessions and tell a full, rich story and have a heck of a lot of fun with the game. Now, when it comes to the work that's required for a GM, there's actually surprisingly very little work that goes into creating adventures for this game. Now, off the top of your head, you'd be thinking, okay, well, it's kind of a medieval system, copying medieval tropes, but using animals, anthropomorphic animals. But it's really designed in such a way that kind of creates this really interesting environment where there's not as much work for the GM. Basically, each adventure is going to be a series of obstacles that are punctuated by conflict that help increase the tension. Mouse Guard makes it really easy to construct a night of gaming by leaving the GM free to add story and drama, which is really what makes the game so darn interesting. Conflict and belief mechanics are just what is designed this game to help keep the story going and create this really fun, interesting style game. So Mouse Guard is an interesting game. It's a wonderful RPG. If you've played Root or any board games along those lines and you wonder what it'd be like to play an RPG like it, I can highly, highly recommend Mouse Guard. And finally, number 7 on the list is Beyond the Wall. Now, Beyond the Wall is a fantasy RPG that is on this list because it dovetails perfectly into 5e if that's where you want to go with your RPGs. And let's face it, let's be honest here, once you start playing RPGs and start going down the rabbit hole into this wonderful gaming environment, you're probably going to start looking into the biggest classic, one of the longest lived RPGs out there, and that's the Dungeons & Dragons games. And Beyond the Wall is almost like a training grounds on how to enjoy and learn RPG and then work your way into playing the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. So this game is basically, this may not make sense to a lot of you, but I'm going to have to say it anyways. Basically what they've done with Beyond the Wall is they've taken the classic late 70s, early 80s red box version of Dungeons & Dragons, brought it into the modern 21st century and creating this game that adds a lot of helping hand-holding for the players, a lot of helping hand-holding for the game master, and a playing environment that helps the players and the game master create the world, create the characters, get together, so all the players feel like they're completely invested in the game right from the beginning, right when they sit down at the table, pull out their dice, and start their adventuring careers. Now, the cool thing about this game is, like some of the other games on this list I mentioned, it does have campaign potential, but it doesn't force you into playing a very, very long, strong out campaign that's going to take months and months or even years to play through. Most of the adventures are going to go through a couple weekends and you're going to tell a complete story, which is very cool about it. But a nice additional thing about this game is, since it's very strongly and so strongly influenced by basic Dungeons & Dragons, you can literally take your characters that you're going to create into this game. If this is what you want to do, you can take them and pretty much transform them into the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons pretty darn easily. And the cool thing is, this game actually creates or helps you create characters in a very simple mechanics, helps you create adventures in simple mechanics, and helps you create a rich world using simple mechanics, simple charts, simple tables. As a group experience, all the players are going to come to the table together, sit down, pull out some charts and some tables, pull out some little couple page booklets, create their characters, create their starting town, create the starting NPCs, create the world, create their adversaries, and work together to create this wonderful environment. And that's what is so awesome about Beyond the Wall. Now, this game offers collaborative character generation, which is really, really cool. The gamers don't always have to take the time or the resources to spend hours and hours creating an adventure before you get to the table with the other players. That's something that's very common in a lot of RPGs these days, as a lot of players will have their player's handbook or their gamer's manual, and they'll sit at home and they'll spend hours and hours trying to create their character and put it together, and then you're going to bring it to the gaming table. That's not what Beyond the Wall is. You come to the table basically with a pencil and paper and some dice, and you sit down and you say, this is kind of what I want to play. I want to play a rogue, I kind of want to play a fighter, I kind of want to play a spellcaster, and then you're going to create your character with the other players, and it's just so phenomenal how it works. You just take a booklet, roll some dice, and you're completely ready to have tons and tons of fun. And the players already, right from the beginning, are feeling like they have input into the world, because your decisions that you're making are also going to influence the decisions of the game master. And again, that creates this wonderful environment. Now, there's not a lot of work in this game when it comes to the GM itself, which is also a nice, cool thing, because a lot of this stuff is going to be based on charts and tables. You're going to roll on a couple of charts, roll on a couple of tables, and that's going to create the adventure for the night, maybe for a couple nights, or even a nice mini campaign. And it's not really that hard. There's not a lot of strong mechanics you need to learn. The dice mechanics in the game are extremely simple, and this game actually does a phenomenal job of explaining how hit points work, better than even Dungeons & Dragons explains how hit points work, because it explains how hit points really should work and makes a nice, clean description that I am sure is probably the best way in the world to explain how hit points work. That's Beyond the Wall. That's the final game on the list. I hope you enjoyed this list of 7 really good games to get board gamers into RPGs. I try to pick different RPGs that offer anywhere from simple mechanics to more complex mechanics, games that offer everything from fantasy environments all the way up to futuristic environments, games that create a little bit of work, games that create a little bit more work, games that offer a group-oriented creation of characters, group-oriented creation of the world. Try to cover the gamut. I think these 7 games do a fantastic job of covering the wide aspects of everything from one-shot adventures all the way up to full-fledged adventures, covering lots of different varieties and lots of variety to bring you a whole bunch of samples of wonderful RPGs that are great for board gamers. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the videos in this continuing series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll be sure to answer them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me at off-the-shelf-board-game-reviews. That's otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll be sure to answer them as quickly as I can. If you like this video, click that like button, click that subscribe button, because your subscriptions do matter. They help keep the lights on. And as always, thanks for watching.